21st Century Skills series. And the next outcome that we'll be discussing is initiative and self-direction. Initiative and self-direction. And what is the outcome if we apply initiative and self-direction? Well, managing goals and time. So, if we are self-directed, we initiate act as opposed to being told to do something, then we can manage our goals more easily because we're stepping into the forefront of those goals. We're not lagging behind, waiting for us to have someone else tell us what to do. Self-direction means that you set the direction for your work. You know what has to be done. You don't have to have someone tell you that do this, do this, do this. If you take initiative and you have self-direction, then you will know what the next step in the process will be in order to achieve your goal. So you do your homework, and a lot of this has to do with courage, because initiative takes courage. It's easier to let somebody lead, isn't it? Then you just follow behind and maybe nobody will notice you, right? But in that, you will never go anywhere. You'll always be at the back of the pack. And the other people who do take initiative and who are self-directed, they will win the game because they had the courage to stand up and move off in a direction. They had the courage to set goals, tangible and intangible. They had the ability to use time and manage workload effectively. So, yeah, it's a bit more work, taking the initiative and being self-directed, but what it does is you stand up as a leader. Now, many of you may not want to be a leader. You always want to be a follower, which is, of course, a terrible waste of your talents, but some do. You can do that. Let somebody else lead you around and you'll be in the middle or lower end of the pack when it comes to your career. Me, I wouldn't take second best. I was either going to be first or die trying. If that meant studying more, I studied more. If that meant staying after school, doing assignments on my own just so I could learn a new technique that I knew was coming up on a test, I stayed late. Actually, when I was in my computer science class, they used to call me Computer Bob because I used to sit at the console of a computer for hours on end, trudging through instructions to see where they went wrong in order to figure out what the problem was. But I figured it out. When others, they did their work, they said, oh, it's the end of class, boom, I'm out of here to go play, do whatever. Well, as a result of that, I wound up being second out of the class of 46. That disturbed me greatly that I was second, but the guy who was first was a real hot shot, so I didn't feel that bad. And the result of that was 2 bankers came into the school. They said, we want the top 2 kids from your next graduating class to start a software company with us. Me and Bobby Kane, who was the guy who won first. Me and he were selected even before my last semester. They graduated me a semester early because I had completed all the required subjects a semester early. And I made very good money traveling around, analyzing things, programming, and working business deals. A tremendous amount of fun. But that would never have happened had I not had stood up and done more than was expected of me. If you want to make something of yourself, you must give more than is expected. And not look for any results. You do it because you're built that way. You do it because for you, excelling becomes a passion. To excel becomes a passion. And that's what it takes. It doesn't take some halfway, I'll slide through as best I can. Yeah, you may survive, you may make a paycheck and have a dog in the front yard, you know, but you'll never, ever achieve your full potential. And that would be a crime. That would be a real crime. Managing time and goals. There are relationships between these two. You have a goal to achieve, right? You've got resources to achieve that goal. And you have an amount of time. Part of the difficulty is matching time to your resources, to the goals, so you can come up with an intelligent estimate of when you'll be done. Now, there are formulas and equations that do that, but you should learn the equations, and they're not difficult, of how to determine how much time it takes to complete a given task, a goal, with a certain number of resources. It can be done. I did it. There's all kinds of, there's things called PERT networks, which you start off at the back end when it's finished, and you work your way to the forefront, putting at each node the amount of time it takes for each node to be accomplished. And at the end of the day, by the time you get to the beginning, you've accumulated all of these pressure point nodes, or all of these key completion nodes that have an estimate on them. And then you just add them all up and see what the number looks like. If it's reasonable, fine. If it's not, then rework the numbers again. It's called a PERT network. My colleagues in the Navy used this in the missile program in World War II when they were first developing missiles and guidance systems. They used it's called a PERT network, or I can't remember the other name, but it's a very nice way. You can look it up, PERT network or end-to-end network. So there are tools that you can use if you choose to research them. So you don't have to wait for someone else to tell you to do these things. You have an innate desire to solve problems. It's like eating peanuts. You know, eating peanuts, once you start, it's hard to stop. Well, with me, the way it was with solving problems was like eating peanuts. It was hard for me to stop once I started, because I got such a kick out of the results. Now, be self-directed learners. A lot of what I've just said speaks to being a self-directed learner, which means that there's going to be a point in time where you must set the pace and the direction of what you're going to learn. You can only learn so many things in school, the base subjects of reading, arithmetic, history, biology, chemistry, maths. But there may be other things like, for example, PERT networking and engineering. You know, if that's something that you might want to do, then start off small. Just work through small little problems first. But be a self-directed learner. Take responsibility for what you learn. Because only you're going to know whether or not that's going to be in line eventually with what you want to do. And any knowledge that you get by doing some research and trying some things out. Some may be valuable, some may not be. You toss away the ones that aren't valuable, you keep the ones that are. But try, look for things that seem to bear on the direction that you want to take your life. It doesn't matter what other people say, like, oh, you're wasting your time, this, that, the other. The heck with them. They don't have to live your life. You have to live your life. And your responsibility is for its success or failure. When you are successful, all those people around you want to pat you on the back and themselves on the back and say, gee, what a wonderful job we did. However, if you fail, and if you're really trying, you should be failing, then they disappear into the woodwork. All fair-weathered friends only want to see success. They don't want to be associated with failure. And the funny thing is, as I've said many times before, if you're not failing at something, you're not trying hard enough. There's a book that I want you to read. Please read it if you get the chance. It changed my life as an engineer. It's Tom Peters, The Circle of Innovation. Tom Peters, write this down. The Circle of Innovation. It's about a 200-300 page book, but it's big print, lots of pictures, there's humor in it. And he talks about failure. And he talks about learning far more from his failures than he did his successes. And in his failures, at least he knew the direction not to go. So he could eliminate that one and take off in this direction. Now he may X off a number of different directions before he finally hits on the one that works. But the word is that you just keep on trying. You pull a different direction, you try something different, and maybe it's that next one that gives you the success that you want. But you don't give up. If you know that this is a good idea in your gut, if you know that this is a good idea that can work, you just have to figure out which knob or switch to turn or whatever it happens to be in order for it to bear fruit. Never be despondent. Never be disappointed when your failure is doing something that would have a productive outcome. That to me is the best research in the world. It's the best research in the world. But when you make a mistake, document it properly so you don't make the same mistake again. Because here's the definition of insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. You should write that down too. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. I mean, it sounds pretty foolish, doesn't it? But you'd be surprised how many people fall into that trap. They get into a groove, a thinking groove, and they just can't seem to break out of it. They have too much emotional, egoic investment in their little groove, and they can't seem to pull out of it. So know when it's okay to run around the groove a couple of times to see if potentially something could be of value, but there's a time to simply cut bait and run. Try this over here. Have always a secondary option, a backup option that you can try. Never ever have something that is a one-off. Because if the one-off doesn't work and you haven't planned for a backup, project or operation, you're just stuck. So always plan for a backup in case this direction, this particular avenue of approach doesn't work. Then scoot off on another. So this is being self-directed learners. Initiative and self-direction. Well, we talked about that. Initiative and self-direction. We said a great deal about it. Now we're going to look at it from another angle. In this world, we find that there are oftentimes when we're put in situations with people from other cultures, religions, ways of eating, ways of dressing, ways of speaking. And there's a natural human distrust of that which is different from us. You've got to somehow get a hold of that and curb it, because it will not ever serve you. Because it doesn't matter what a person's skin is. What doesn't matter what a person's clothing is or what they eat or some of the words that they use. Get into what it is that they're saying. Listen carefully. They may have some phenomenal ideas. I'll give you an example. In the turn of the century, the 19th to the 20th century, there was a mathematician from India. He worked in a clerk's office, but he was brilliant. He used a goddess as his source of inspiration. His name was Ramanujan. I don't know, many of you may have heard of him, and if you haven't, for God's sake, look up his life, Ramanujan. And he was probably one of the most brilliant mathematical minds of the 20th century. And one of the people at Oxford, Haley, or I think his name was Haley, got his papers that he sent for his perusal. And he saw equations and proofs, what they called mathematical proofs, that nobody as yet had ever come up with. So he paid for Ramanujan to come up to Cambridge and eventually became a fellow of the university, free of charge, just to work on math stuff. And over his few years of working there, he produced some of the most elegant and beautiful equations and proofs that of certain theorems that were like it came from the mind of God. There's nobody else up to that point had thought. And here's this little Indian clerk, very unassuming, not big personality, but yet his brain, his mind was so beautiful, so elegant. So never ever judge a person by their looks, their clothing, their habits. See how they think. Hold any judgment in abeyance. Don't judge too soon, because you may judge incorrectly. And I enjoy reading his life periodically. Every year, I will look up his life on YouTube. His life is on YouTube, by the way. The Man Who Knew Infinity. Try to look it up on YouTube. The Man Who Knew Infinity. It's a story about his life. He unfortunately died as a very young man. He was frail. And in his stay at Cambridge, he was a Brahmin. He could not eat food that was palatable for him. And he gradually, his body withered away. He went back to Calcutta or wherever he was from. And even in bed, he was popping out equations that were the marvel of the age. I think he died at only the age of 36, similar to Vivekananda. Seems like these really good ones die early. But please read the story of his life. That truly is a marvel of inspiration. So social and cross-cultural interaction through your careers, and even more so as we move forward in the 21st century, we're going to run across people from all over the world. Different cultures, different clothing, different speech patterns and languages. And remember, just because they speak something different doesn't mean that it's any bad or any better than yours. It is simply different. Look at differences simply as differences to understand, not as differences in a negative sense to have to put up with or to get around. Because in trying to understand someone, you form a bond with them. And in that bond, you begin to subtly transmit and receive, and sometimes in even a nonverbal level, information that you would have never known. And you'll call it inspiration. You'll call it just a cool thought. But whenever we work together, we produce call it a magnetic field around us. It's very simple. You know, we are an electromagnetic engine. That's pure biophysics, and it's nothing magical. But what it is how does it affect us? It affects us by those who are uplifting and smart. When they're close to us, they tend to uplift us. We feel a little bit better. People who have a negative attitude and a negative way of looking at things tend to bring us down. So always try to be around those that have a positive attitude, those that have a let's get it done, regardless of where they come from, what they look like. Look at the results, and the results only. And use each other as tools to help each other out. My basic request would be never judge anyone. Never judge anyone. You could be wrong. And more likely you are wrong. So you have it within your power to forge bonds of friendship and creativity, or the opposite. And as citizens of the world now, and not just India, you have an obligation to your country, to your people here, to put forth the best foot forward, so that when somebody goes back to their home, they can say, oh wow, these guys from India that I worked on a project, they were so cool, all they wanted to work and get it done and come up with ideas. You know, those are the kinds of feedback that you want to hear, because it just makes you feel good, if for no other reason. So, does anyone have any questions on what is initiative or self-direction? Managing time.